You're listening to Breaking BizDev with John Tyerman and Mark Wainwright. Conversations that break down, beat up, and redefine business development for the professional services firms of tomorrow. And now for your hosts, John and Mark.
Welcome back to another episode of Breaking BizDev. If this is your first time here, thanks for joining us on this podcast where we like to beat up and break down topics related to business development. My name is John Tyerman, and as always, I'm joined by my trusted co-host, Mark Wainwright. And today we're going to beat up business development along your career path and break it down, what you should be doing at your early career and mid stages and later career. So I'm excited to dive into this topic with you, Mark.
Good. I think it's a great one. And if you are not here for the first time, just disregard that preamble that John had there, because we know you're a regular listener, that you're part of the team, you're part of our Breaking BizDev squad. If everything goes well, you'll get your t-shirt and your branded cap one of these days. So we'll have the merch ready to go. Right. If you're a frequent flyer and a longtime fan, thank you for joining us on this journey. And speaking of journeys, we're going to talk a little bit about the careers of all of our dear professional services experts out there and look at it through a specific lens, or maybe two lenses. We're going to look at people's careers, like you said, early career, mid-career, and late career through a marketing lens and through a sales lens. John, it's critical for me to always say this. Business development, our good pal, business development always takes those terms, activities, everything that is marketing and sales, throws in a big pile and says, all right, good luck, go get it. They're different. There's different activities related to both. There's different behaviors related to both. And we're going to talk about those two things. We're going to break them down, and we're going to look at marketing and sales throughout the career of a professional.
And the inspiration for this topic actually came from, you did a guest appearance on the structural engineering podcast with Max and Zach, talking about this, focused on an engineer over the course of an engineer's career. But I think that we can broaden that a little bit and talk more about kind of general about experts and practitioners, because I don't think this is unique to just the engineering industry.
I totally agree. We can both broaden it to bring in other experts, other individuals in professional services firms, and trim it down a little bit, because that was an exhaustive exploration I had with Max and Zach. That
was a long episode.
They're fantastic hosts, and I had a really great time walking through the life of an engineer with them in those early, mid, and late career stages, and what's happening with different marketing and sales activities all throughout that point. So that was a great episode. If you've got enough discretionary time, I would recommend that you go have that a listen. It's a good podcast in general. If you are an engineer in general, or specifically a structural engineer, that is a great podcast. They are good early and mid-career professionals, and it's definitely worth a listen.
And they embody curiosity too, which is one of the sales competencies, or one of the, a major contributor to some of the 6 sales competencies we went over on an earlier episode of this podcast. Actually, in that, we talked about the different levels of mastery along those different skills. And I think, that's a great foundational kind of podcast to listen to after you listen to this one. Go back and check that one out too, if you're interested in improving your sales skills as an expert or practitioner. So let's dive into, let's start at chronologically. Let's start early in a practitioner's career. Maybe they're not an expert yet, right? So they still need to gain that technical knowledge, but there's also business development, sales, and marketing skills that all practitioners who aspire to be experts need to kind of contribute to in a firm.
We had talked about there's our little asterisk, our little caveat on this whole thing before we kick off into this specific topic is, I think in your education as a technical professional, I think this thing starts to creep into your mind that says, the better you can be at your craft, the more skilled you can be at your craft, the more degrees, the more certifications, licenses, et cetera. If you can assemble this unassailable expertise in your career, that will be the sole determinant of your success. And it's a bit of a fallacy because there's much more to it. And we're going to talk about two really important components that lead to both individual and organizational success over your career, which is marketing and selling. So absolutely, it's important that technical professionals be, operating at the peak of their craft, right? That they're skilled, that they have lots of specific technical know-how, but that's just not enough in order to create frankly, from our perspective, a really successful career as an expert. So that's a little caveat here at the beginning of that, is that this stuff is important. These are important elements of that.
Yeah. And when I was in my early career, when I was first going out, fresh out of college, and I was applying to different marketing positions, one of the things that I would say is what I lack in experience, I will make up for with an open mind and a willingness to learn.
Yeah,
right.
Good.
And employers like that. I was able to get a job, and one of my first job right out of college was as a research assistant. And I think that really set me up for success down the road, because research is absolutely something that an early career professional can do. And what I mean by research is you can go and you can look at competitors, right? You can look at influencers in the marketplace, in your industry. You can go and research different challenges and topics. So if we recall that last episode that we did, Mark, where we talked about the 5 different levels of mastery, this is absolutely a level 1 where you're aware of these different topics, these different influencers and competitors in the marketplace. So
Agreed.
I think that's a marketing activity that early career professionals can absolutely put into practice.
Good. What else can early career professionals do with specifically related to marketing?
Well, first of all, I don't think that firms should send early career professionals to events and say, here, go do some marketing, right? Go manage a booth at a conference. I think they're ill-equipped for that because they're not ready for that quite yet, right? Instead, I think that there are some operational things, some operational marketing activities like managing the website, managing the blog, not managing social media, not necessarily creating the content, because there needs to be a level of understanding before they can practice content creation. But I think managing the content that's created from mid and later career professionals, I think that's absolutely something that they can do. So these early career professionals can gain an understanding of the process, the marketing process.
Yeah, good. And speaking of process, that totally dovetails in with this whole world of sales.
There you go. So what are some sales activities? I'm glad that we're differentiating these. What are some sales activities that early career professionals can contribute to?
So as they're taking those first few steps into their career, they're starting to be exposed to new ideas, building awareness, building knowledge, just exposing young career professionals to sales language, sales processes, just the whole concepts of how a maybe turns into a contract. Just exposing them to that is really important. Showing them how proposals are generated, how you generate your pricing, your fees, showing them the nitty-gritty of contracts and everything that's included in that. Just keeping them aware of, the dollars and cents is super important. Way too often I talk to young career professionals and they say, have you seen the contract? Do you know the level of, whatever level of detail that's in that contract, the work to be done, the desired outcomes of the client, the dollars and cents, the tasks that are involved in that, whatever, all that stuff. And they're like, no, actually, I don't. I just come in and I do my work and I'm done for the day. And then when that's done, I, move on to the next thing. So I think there's a big opportunity just for the young career professionals just to open up their eyes and be exposed to these sales tools, sales processes, sales steps, all that stuff. And I think that exposure starts laying the foundation for some good future behaviors, so that when they're assigned to a project, or they start working with a particular client, they come into that asking the right questions. Why are we doing this? What do they want to get out of it? How can we best help them achieve these big outcomes they want? How much money do we have to spend on the work? How much profit can we make? Like what are the financial details of that? Just exposing them to that is super important.
Totally. And that can be done by simply, there's some simple tasks like maybe proofreading a proposal or sitting in on a sales call, not necessarily asking any questions, but just sitting in and listening.
Sure.
Right. And that can lead to, those questions that bubble up like, well, what if we did this differently? Right.
Sure.
Why are we doing this? And questioning and challenging the status quo. There was something that you said on that structural engineering podcast that I think is also applicable here. And it's around networking, which can be a little bit ambiguous. Is it sales? Is it marketing? I think networking kind of sits in that messy middle that we like to say.
Right.
But you mentioned matching early career professionals with a cohort of their peers in either associations or other client organizations so that they can grow together. I think that was a really great point that you made.
Yeah, that's an important one. When we think about pulling younger career professionals into a client relationship, people almost default to, well, we have to introduce our young career professionals to their senior team, right, to continue that relationship. You can do that, but the reality is the senior team members in the client organization are going to be gone at some point. They're going to retire or leave, or whatever it is. What I think is most productive and smartest for sort of the future of both organizations is creating this laddering effect, so that individuals at a certain career level in your firm are developing relationships with their career level peers in the client organization. And maybe a lot of times that means that they're not necessarily in these big sort of contract negotiation conversations, but they are developing a working relationship, so that at some point in the future, they can look back on this relationship that they've developed over the last 10, 20 years or so. They're in those contract negotiation conversations, and they can benefit from those same long-term sort of mutually beneficial relationships that their senior members did, 20 years previous. So that laddering effect, I think, is important.
It's kind of like a farm system for your sales organization,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, right. You're listening to Breaking BizDev,
the podcast that beats up, breaks down, and redefines business development for the professional services firms of tomorrow. Your hosts are John Tyerman, founder of Red Cedar Marketing, the podcast marketing company for experts and professional services firms,
and Mark Wainwright, principal consultant and founder of Wainwright Insight, the fractional sales manager and sales consultant to professional services firms.
If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by following the show and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts.
And now, back to the show.
So great. So those are all some marketing, some sales activities, some networking kind of guidelines for early career professionals. And these are folks that have, maybe it's within their first 5 years in the field. So let's shift gears a little bit. We're moving along the timeline to this mid-career, which let's say is between 5 and 19 years. Do you think that was a good time range to think about the mid-career?
I mean, that 15 years is a heck of a lot of time. Maybe it's a little bit less than that, right? And maybe we're in the plus or minus 10 sort of ballpark there. But yeah, that's mid-career people, experts in firms. These are people who are, maybe starting to lead projects, or at least sort of, one of the more senior team members, whether they're an engineer or an architect or an analyst or, a consultant. They are working very closely with the senior team. They're getting exposed a little bit more to the clients. Maybe they are, leading or very soon to be leading the client engagement. So yeah, these are people who, have a level of comfort and confidence working with clients. They are people who are good, technical professionals, good at their craft. So they are developed from that standpoint. What types of marketing related activities and maybe behaviors do you think these people should be exhibiting?
Well, I like using those 5 levels of mastery as kind of a framework to guide this conversation. So if we're thinking about it from that lens, the activities that these professionals should be doing, they should be practicing a lot, and then that leads to the continuous improvement, right? And so from a marketing standpoint, I think this is where experts and practitioners can start to create content. They can work on their personal brand and everything that comes along with that. So how to position your personal brand in the marketplace, how to contribute content to your personal brand. Maybe that's publishing on LinkedIn, maybe that's starting a podcast or a newsletter. So I think that those are activities that are absolutely kind of match very well with the mid-career professional. I think curiosity, there still needs to be a sense of curiosity at this level, right? So if you're practicing and you're continuously improving, you haven't arrived per se, right? There is
Right.
you still need to hold on to that sense of continuous learning and development. I think this is where you can extend, kind of spread your wings a little bit as a professional and go outside of your firm, your internal organization, and start to learn from peers and colleagues at other firms or in associations, going to networking events and maybe shadowing an older mentor that you have, right? So I think
Right.
this is where professionals can kind of spread their wings a little bit from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah, I love the fact that you bring up that whole concept of a personal brand. I think that's great. It's and that's not, just that's not, sort of wearing the company logo on your shirt or
No.
towing the company line, right? That's something you're developing in parallel
Well,
with all
firms
of that.
always say our people are our biggest asset, right?
Right.
And one of the many things that firms do is they point to their people as a differentiator. But what I find very frustrating, quite honestly, is the reluctance for firm leadership to invest in the personal brands of their people, right? It doesn't make any sense. If you're going to tout your people as your biggest asset, you should be willing to invest in their personal brands or at least encourage them to invest in their personal brands.
Right. That, and I think that comes from a place of fear that, senior team members are afraid that, a particular individual in their firm is maybe spending too much time promoting their own individual expertise, or, publishing a blog or participating in a podcast or whatever it is that isn't necessarily associated with the firm. I think it comes from a place of fear, but
Yeah.
you can just flip that. You can totally flip that on its head and say, wow, what a fantastic opportunity this is for the organization to have these individuals who want to grow and advance their own personal careers. And oh, by the way, this is in fantastic alignment with our organizational goals and where we're headed. So I think
And
it's a
it's a way
win-win.
to generate new business. It's a way to attract the kind of business that you want to if you position your personal brand the right way. And I think that's kind of the key to that whole thing, is how you position your personal brand, because there is absolutely an alignment that happens between what's good for the individual and what's good for the firm.
Great point.
Well, Mark, let's kind of change, turn the tables a little bit. What are some sales activities that mid-career professionals can do to contribute to business development for firms?
Some of these people are starting to maybe support sales efforts, support proposal creation. Maybe they're contributing content. Maybe hopefully they're participating in the series of conversations that I like to refer to as, the sales process, the sales conversations, that are a series of qualification conversations, deep discovery conversations, proposal conversations, et cetera. Sometimes they are supporting, and hopefully they're getting to the point where they're starting to lead those conversations, which is great. They are developing their own client relationships and sort of developing and maintaining sort of organizational client relationships as well. I think this lines a little bit with that whole personal brand thing, is that they are establishing these trusted advisor expert relationships with their specific connections and clients. They start to embrace and they start to undertake prospecting, which is that targeted
Yep.
one-to-one outreach to, prospective clients that they don't know. maybe they have great professional connections that they've had for 10 plus years or so. And they start really leveraging those relationships and start asking for referrals and introductions to prospective clients, folks they don't know. So they start to build that muscle around creating new opportunities through prospecting, through asking for referrals. They sort of embrace that as an individual. And ultimately they are practicing and then improving on all of this. When we look at, again, those 5 steps of mastery, they know the concepts, they understand how they work, they're practicing pricing, they're practicing proactive outreach and prospecting, they're doing great sales planning, they're showing good energy, all those things that, a professional who is advancing in their career or their levels of mastery to practicing and then improvement. And that all leads to this, late career stage that we're going to talk about last.
And I think that one thing that's just kind of dawned on me was at this point in these professionals' careers, there could be, I don't know, would you say that there's a fork in the road, right? Where you could kind of lean into maybe some more of these marketing skills or lean a little bit more into some of these sales skills? Or do you think there needs to be a healthy balance between these two as these professionals kind of evolve along their career?
Yeah, good point. I think there's absolutely forks in the road. I think that if individuals, early career, mid career, even late career, start showing interest and abilities and just get excited about different parts of their practice, that's great. I mean, you have individuals who become managing principals, and managing principals are a lot of times involved in the other functional areas of
Right.
a professional services firm. They're in finance and
Operations, HR.
operations,
Yeah.
HR, all those things. Sure, you can see that, right? You can have some individuals who start to show greater interest in doing marketing related activities or sales related activities. Or you can even have individuals who, just want to be the best practitioner that they possibly can. And they're really focused on, just deepening and deepening their technical expertise. All those areas are possible. The caveat on all of that is that you cannot have too many people focused on, operations,
Right.
technical excellence, financial management. You need to have a wealth of individuals in the firm who are engaged and excited about marketing the firm and then selling your services, creating those potential clients and, walking them through to a contract. You need to have a lot of people focused on that because, as we know, John, the whole business development thing, marketing and selling stuff, it's a lot of work. It's not second nature to most, professionals, most experts in these firms, and it's hard. So you have to have a lot of people that are working together as a team, supporting each other, and really, really focused on, growth and having their firm succeed.
That's right. That's right. Because without clients and without revenue, there is no accounting, there is no architecture, there is no engineering, right? It
No
doesn't
need.
happen without the clients.
No need for it without clients.
That's right. So let's transition from the mid-career to kind of late stage careers and what experts at this point, well-known experts, they've been practicing their craft for maybe 20 years or so. Let's talk about what they can do to contribute to both marketing and sales.
I think what we've kind of talked about here is that there's this wonderful dual path of these late career professionals, right?
Yeah.
One is, continuing to push forwards, and with this whole expertise thing. And then the other is starting to open the door and make room for others. So from a marketing perspective, what does that mean to you?
I was blessed to have 2 mentors early in my career who were both in their later careers, and they both exhibited, I thought, really strong marketing traits. Kelly Waffle and Lee Fredrickson. So Kelly and I co-hosted the Visible Expert podcast, and Lee was managing partner of Hinge when I was at Hinge. And in both cases, they both made a point to create the time and committed to publishing content. So whether that was Lee writing a blog post, every other week, or if it was Kelly and I creating content on the Visible Expert podcast, they were both making time, even though that they were inundated with all sorts of other things, right? So Lee was managing partner of the agency, and so he had his hand, and he was managing a whole lot of other things, but he always made time for marketing. And so I think that's something that I've noticed. I'm not in that late stage of my career, so I can only kind of speak from what I've seen and observed.
Right.
From others. And one thing that you mentioned, Mark, before we got on this recording here was speaking engagements. And you like to say, be the sage on the stage. I love that.
Yeah, super important. And this relates to, whatever conferences, events, whenever there's an opportunity to be a recognized authority, late stage professionals need to embrace that. Right. So yeah, that's a big deal. And I think that most event organizers, conference organizers are really receptive to that. That's what they want. They want these tenured experts to be out there, to be recognized authorities. They will help them do that. So that's an important part of this. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what about from a sales perspective?
So from a sales perspective, you would think that the number one priority for these late career professionals is to continue to lead the charge, right? To be putting firms on their shoulders and doing all the revenue generation, doing all of that work, constantly building client relationships, building new relationships, just running hard at that. But I really think that what's more important is bringing others along, bringing the second generation or even the third generation,
teaching others.
Yeah, teaching others, right? Because they've achieved that fifth level of mastery here that we talk about. So rather than continuing to be the lead on all of this new business stuff, they need to be mentoring others. They need to be making room, frankly, for those second generation or third generation team members to engage, and then maybe occasionally screw up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe fail, right? Get into a sales situation where the conversation didn't go right, the proposed solution or the pricing that they put forward was off the mark, whatever it is. Failure is such a powerful learning tool, and firms need to embrace that. They need to embrace the opportunity for younger career or second generation leaders to get into a situation where they kind of stub their toe a little bit and learn from that, learn and grow. So they need to be creating opportunities for younger folks to learn and to grow. So that's super important.
Yeah, thinking back to that, I think touching on those 2 points in my examples, both of those mentors for me in my early career, that's exactly what they were doing, is they were trying to bring me along. And I failed so many times, and I've learned from it, and I've got the scars to prove it. So yeah, that's a very good point.
Right. I think, really the mindset, hopefully, with a late career professional is that there needs to be an urgency in developing these young experts, these young talents. You need to be developing them likely faster than the firm realizes, or that they realize, or that they're ready for. Because if you're just developing people at a pace at which they're very comfortable with, right, it's likely too slow.
They're not growing.
Yeah, they're not growing, right? And I think people grow when they kind of reach or exceed that sort of comfort, that comfort level, and particularly in areas that are, more challenging, like sales. So yes, I think there needs to be some urgency in developing next generation leaders. My big picture on this, and one of the things I talk about when I speak to senior team members, is when you reach the point in your career where you're ready for this transition to happen, you want to turn around to your organization and see a wealth of sales expertise. You don't want to turn around to the firm and say, I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like, because none of these people really understand how to, create and then, close these new opportunities. They just don't understand the whole revenue generation thing. So that's not what you want. You want to be able to just ride off, into the sunset with some comfort and confidence that the firm is well prepared for tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, bringing that farm system along.
Right.
I don't know why that's sticking with me.
Yeah.
I think we covered everything that we wanted to cover in this episode. So I think this is a great kind of overview of what experts and practitioners can expect along their career journey and how they can contribute to business development and how they can move along the different levels of mastery. So I think that this has been a really great episode. I think our listeners are gonna get a lot of value out of it.
I think so as well, and I've enjoyed it, and I've been fortunate to be able to watch professionals move, through these different stages in their careers, watch their development, and in some cases help sort of guide and advise them as they do so. So it's been a wonderful experience for me. So, John, this has been fun. Until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Breaking BizDev. Subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or listen to the show at breakingbizdev.com. This episode was produced by Red Cedar Marketing. If you think a business podcast is right for your company, visit redcedarmarketing.com to learn more.